We gathered here today to unveil a plaque that the the Tarras Rural Women's Group, if I got it right, have donated and had made for the cemetery. What we have here is the roses that Joy here and her friends gathered for the Cromwell or the Goldfields collection, I think it's also known as, and we've planted them here at the Tarras Cemetery. And the Tarras Rural Women have donated this wonderful brass plaque, which I think is just wonderful. And so Joy's going to unveil that. I'm now going to hand you over to Heather here, and she'll just explain a little bit about it, and I'll catch up with you again down at Jan's house.
I'll have the umbrella, can I? Yes, it's hot, isn't it? Wasn't it a good idea to put the seat there? Oh, where is it? Oh, you don't need
You should have a hat on, you silly girl.
I know.
So?
Anyway, well, I'd like to welcome everybody here to the cemetery. It's lovely to see so many Central Otago Heritage Rose people here. And I'm sorry we're a wee bit thin on the ground with Rural Women, but there's been a lot on with the show, and of course the Ellerslie Flower Show last week, and there's still lots on. And I know Monday wasn't a very practical day probably, but it was the only day we could fit in really, so I'm delighted with the turnout. It's just lovely to see so many of you that have travelled so far and are so interested in this project. Jean's probably told you a wee bit. Jan and I are sort of the movers and the shakers behind the roses. We come and scratch around here quite often. Jan is very good. She turns the water on. You'll see we're on trickle irrigation. And I think you'll agree that the roses have done very well since we planted them, not last spring, but the spring before. We have lost some with rabbits, and some just didn't make it because it was probably too dry. We started off, Rural Women started, probably, I can't remember how many years ago, when we decided that we would do something for our cemetery. And we just had a wire fence that went right round the cemetery. So we raised funds and we raised enough money to find somebody that could build the stone wall for us. And that's been a real asset to our little cemetery. So then time went on, and Jan and I saw that the World Heritage Rose Conference was in Dunedin, and we thought we should go. And it was probably one of the best weekends we've ever had, wasn't it? We had a wonderful weekend, and we became really enthused with Heritage Roses, so much so that we went to Paris to the World Conference when the next conference was on.
Tarras to Paris.
Tarras to Paris. It was rather funny because when we came home, coming up through the pig route, Jan said, "Now this has been a great weekend. Wherever the next conferences will go, shall we?" And I said, "Yes, what a great idea." So one day she came down to the shop and she said, "Guess where the conference is?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Paris, are we going?" And I sort of gulped, and she said, "Well, why not?" So we said, "Why not?" So we went to Paris, and of course we had a wonderful time. It was fabulous. So the story was that when we decided to go to the conference, or before we decided to go to the conference, we saw in the Rose Journal that there was an award for a person that had collected roses that were going to be extinct. And we thought Joy absolutely fitted this category. But I was put off Joy, I'll have to admit, because it had to be accompanied by a 350-word essay, and I can't even get my Christmas cards out. So anyway, I was in the mall one day and I met Sally Young, and I told her about it, and she said, "I love writing, I'll write the citation." So that's how we came to put in the award. We nominated Joy because we felt she'd done a wonderful job. She used to travel with Con and my mother-in-law, Connie Perriam, and I thought they were quite strange. They would go on Sundays with their plastic bags and their secateurs, and they went, do you remember the call, Joy, when you got stuck in the Nevis and John had to come and get you out? That would be looking for the Nevis Rose, no doubt. But now, of course, as I've got older, I fully appreciate what you've done, and we owe a lot to Joy for the fact that she has collected these roses, and they've gone, "Oh, here's Helen with roses." That's lovely. So I'm not allowed to say who wrote this, but you'll probably know. Joy Chapman has been described as, Joy won't even know this, as a standard bearer for the old rose movement for decades, in a quiet, constructive, non-pushy way, and is a mover and shaker for the heritage rose movement, generously sharing time, energy, knowledge and plants. Her deep knowledge of the genus Rosa and plants in general comes from extensive research and practical experience. And of course Joy did live in Tarras for some time, so she's very much, we feel she's one of us. Notable among her activities in her rescue, preservation and distribution of old plants. In the 1970s, with the Clyde Dam construction, Joy made it her mission to save old roses from land to be flooded. In Joy's words, they were pioneer roses, unlike any others, many unnamed, brought by the early settlers, including miners. Her search ranged for miles as she took cuttings from places such as Cromwell's Main Street, the back of commercial properties, private gardens, orchard, riverbanks, anywhere where the plants might be lost under the new lake. When the remote Pioneer Cemetery in the remote Nevis Valley was to be sprayed by Dot, she rushed up there for cuttings, which included the rose now known as Nevis moss, and added it to her collection. She grew on many plants which moved with her as she shifted from one home to another. Finally, her Otago son Lloyd took over the collection. Roses which could not be identified were named after the places where they were found. Example, Chinatown moss or Lowburn rose. And the group is now known as the Goldfields collection. Joy, we really thank you for what you've done. And part of the citation when we nominated you for this award was that the roses would be housed somewhere as a collection. And we decided that this was a very suitable place. And I think you'll all agree that they're going to be lovely when they all hold hands.
Oh, they're
so
looking
thank you, Joy,
fabulous.
for what you've done. We really appreciate that. And I think we'll ask Joy to come and take the what will we call it, Jen? Red cloth. Before she does that,
Unveiling.
I've had lots of problems with this plaque and everything that's been happening. Unfortunately, when they sent me the plaque, they had missed off heritage on the roses, so that was a no-no. So I sent it back to them, and they said, and they're not sure whether it's their fault or mine, it could easily have been mine, but I'm sure I would have put heritage on, but never mind. So they have taken it back and they've deleted that, and they've put it in such fine writing that I can't see it, so I'll be interested to see if you can see it. But what we're going to do is do another wee plaque that'll go under it, which will say Tarras Rural Women and Central Otago Heritage Rose Project. So that has to go up yet. Then we couldn't decide how to identify the roses. The roses are all numbered on the plaque, and I've had little numbers made which I've put in by the roses. Unfortunately they did that wrong too. There's only 10 roses in the collection, but for some reason the people that made them went to 18. So a big problem, I've got to go back to them. But anyway, you'll see 1 to 10 are numbered with the gold numbers, and the idea was that all I think Annan's Orchard's number 1, so all Annan's Orchard will have 1 beside them. I'm yet to find really suitable labels, and I think we will, Jan and I have talked about it, and we think we do want to have each rose actually labelled with its name on it. So that'll be our next little mission, to do that.
I actually had all the old Cromwell roses labelled down as old Cromwell, but they were tied onto the bushes, and when somebody came and zealously pruned them, they jolly well pruned off the labels. So they got all mixed up.
We want to keep it uniform, and as we add more roses, we want to be able to have the same naming system. So if anybody comes up with a really good idea, we'd really appreciate that.